Hello and welcome. This is We Make Art, and I am your host, artist and mentor, Sarah Rockwood. Thank you for joining me today for what may be a difficult discussion. You saw the title of the episode, or maybe you didn't. So maybe you just click on it right away without taking it in. But the title of today is Art Isn't Worth Dying For. And this is something that's percolated in my brain and in my heart for a while now. And I know that on the surface, bringing forth this discussion, like saying something as black and white, as categorically clear as art isn't worth dying for, sounds strange coming from me. You know, I have created elemental alchemy. I coach and mentor and teach artists and women how to build lives that hold space for their art and weave and are interwoven with their art. We're starting early with the metaphors and the analogies today. But, you know, a life where the art is something nourishing. And that is the key word for me in this. That is the thing I come back to again and again, is this idea of nourishment. That the art and the life should nourish each other. Because living one without the other, life with no art, or art with no life, is a recipe for disaster. In my opinion, in my personal lived experience. So when I say art isn't worth dying for, do I mean a physical death? Well, sometimes we've seen it. We've seen it, haven't we? In popular culture, we have seen artists who go too far down the rabbit hole and can't come back. But there is also the spiritual death of not being connected to one's art and living half a life. And I feel the need to come forward and say art isn't worth dying for, because I feel that we have been taught, we have been raised on in the arts, this idea that suffering is noble, that sacrifice is necessary, that unless you are depleted, you know, leave it all on the stage. The show must go on. These things, these idioms that we are raised with, these philosophies that we are raised with in the arts, are so self-destructive and, in my opinion, unnecessary for the creation of great work, and unnecessary for the living of a life that is fulfilling and full of art. I mean, I started in this world, in this business we call show, when I was very young. Single digits, 9 years old, joining a theater company that in retrospect was a little mini kingdom cult-ish thing. You know, an adult man running a children's theater company like we were professionals, expecting a professional standard, but not teaching us what a professional standard was, raising us in that company under his kind of mercurial direction. I mean, as I catch myself saying, but the shows were excellent. And the shows were excellent. They really were. But at what cost? I was terrified. Every time I did a show, every time I went to rehearsal, absolutely terrified. But I had it in my head. I had it in my body that this was the pathway to success. This kind of pain and suffering was what art is. There was a moment in my 5th year with the company where I was auditioning for my arts high school that I ended up going to. And it's so interesting when I find myself talking about this, I get very serious, and there is an internal dialogue for me of like, well, come on, Sarah, you were a little kid. It couldn't have been that serious, but it was. This was like, again, life and death at 14. And that life and death was, or idea was supported by the people around me, because I went to the director and I asked him for a reference letter. I told him where I was going to audition, and I asked him for a reference letter. And he said, well, let's talk about it. Go sit over there, like away from the group. I think it was like dinner break or something. And he didn't care. I mean, he was going to talk to me and everyone could just fucking do whatever they wanted. He didn't give a shit. And you can tell there's still some venom in me. I tell you, I'm processing. This is all processing. There's so many layers to the onion that I think I'll be doing this till the day I die. Just like being present with those moments of rage and going, what's behind that? Anyway, so he sits me down, and I think I'm going to get a big discussion. And he gives me a piece of paper and a pen, and he goes, draw infinity, and walks away. Walks away. Draw infinity. And I'm looking at this paper and I'm going, draw infinity. So I drew a path. I drew a path that disappeared into the horizon. And he came back and he looked at my paper and he was like, oh, that's pretty good. But I would have done this. And then he just drew the infinity symbol. And I was like, well, duh. Like, okay, way to be creative, adult man. Who every year would give us a speech about how he could be in LA directing film, but he chose to stay and work with us, so we needed to appreciate his sacrifice. But he went on to tell me in this little meeting that, like, if I was really serious about being an actress, then I had to give up my entire life. I'm in the 8th grade. Give up my entire life to being an actress. That all I should be doing is going to school and watching movies and reading plays. He's like, you should come home from school, go immediately to your room and read a play or watch a film. You need to be so committed that your parents ask you what's wrong with you. At 14, he's telling me this, and I'm going, okay, all right, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. And that's what I did. You know, I took it so deeply to heart because, and I think a lot of us that come to the arts feel things very deeply. And the feeling of things very deeply as children, I think, draws in or makes possible more trauma. Not by any means that it is our fault. By no means. Things happen to us. I don't know if it's just part of the artistic experience, or we are more aware of the things that happen to us. So to hear this from my director, from someone I wanted very much to please and look up to and had worked me really hard for 5 years, I wanted to do what he said so badly because the arts offered an escape to my life in general, right? I do wonder if we propagate and promote this idea of sacrifice and suffering for our art because it offers an escape hatch to lives that we don't really want to be in. And we don't realize that's what's happening, so then we just grow up and teach and then pass on that ideology to the next group of young people that are coming down the pipeline. So I can look back now at my youth. And I don't know why I'm laughing about that, because I was young at the time. I can look back at my youth and understand that part of why I threw myself so fully and completely into acting was it offered me a way out of my house. It offered me a way to avoid my day-to-day life. And that is a way of living that it is only now at 46 that I'm really, truly unpacking. At my 20-year college reunion, which we did on Zoom because it was the pandemic, we met up as a class in the Zoom room, and there were a few break-off groups and things like that. And I went to college for musical theater performance. And one of the women in this little break-off room I was in, we were talking to our dance teacher, and we got to the subject of our bodies. And one of the women shared that, like, you know, she said this laughing, and we all laughed with her. We all laughed with her as she said, you know, I was on so many laxatives to try and lose weight that I was always worried I'd shit myself in tap class. So the big joke was, don't shit while you shuffle. And we all laughed. We all laughed because we knew exactly what she was talking about. I mean, I was never on laxatives, but, you know, my friends and I did go to the health food store and get the supplements to try to, like, lose the weight. And, like, it just lose the weight. God. Oh, I catch myself in real time saying things that I know are unhealthy and untrue and just ass backwards and are part of the conditioning of someone knows better than I do what I need, and if I'm not giving everything, if I'm not prepared to die for my art, then I'm not a real artist. And that can go fuck itself. And I have a million examples of this. I have a million examples of where I just absolutely worked myself to the point of destruction in the quest to be seen as a real artist, seen as heavy, seen as talented, seen as the best in the room. And the worst example I have of this in my own personal life is that I stayed with my ex for as long as I did. That I stayed in that incredibly abusive paradigm for nearly 20 years. He was the perfect amalgamation of all the worst things I had experienced through my teachers, through my directors, through my coaches in the arts. Up until that point, he put it all together in a beautiful package that made my whole nervous system go, oh, okay. Just this repeated lie that unless I was absolutely working my fingers to the bone, then I didn't deserve a career. I didn't deserve to be paid. I didn't deserve to be considered a good songwriter or a good singer or a good person. So yes, I have experienced a very extreme version of this. This idea of, like, one must suffer to be considered an artist. But I don't think I'm entirely alone. I'm sure there are others who have experienced just as extreme, but I know, hell, I saw them. I was in class with them. I wasn't the only person listening to the teachers. You know, I'm not the only person who have sat down with entertainment lawyers and record executives and, you know, and agents and gone, oh, okay. So some of us hear that, feel that information of sacrifice is the only way to be a real artist, to push oneself to the brink of death. Physically, spiritually, psychologically is the only way to be a real artist. And we dive into that. And we unwittingly throw ourselves into that kind of destruction, self-destruction. And then I think there is another extreme where artists get that information and then shut down on the artistic side of themselves. They create a life where there is no room for personal expression. You know, that art is something that can destroy me, therefore I'm not going to do it. And I use that word destroy. I use these words because I think there is something very spiritually violent about denying yourself something so integral to who you are. I see this in some of my clients. You know, they're super high functioning women, super high functioning humans who are so good at getting things done and at supporting other people, at helping others produce their art. I've worked with women who are unbelievably good at helping their friends get their shows off the ground. But their lives hold no time for their own work. And then they wonder why they get headaches right before a meeting, or they have to start their day with coffee and 2 Tylenol, or they cram in a podcast about art as they drive to work or to another meeting or getting their kids to school, because at least it's something. At least it's a tiny bit of the life they wish they were living. And I've lived that side of the coin too. For years, you know, after I thought, there was a moment in my early 30s where I really thought I had a horrible meeting with a head of a record label. And that meeting, it was very strange because they asked me to the meeting. They booked the meeting. So I was very, very excited for this meeting. You know, when the head of a record label is like, I want to have lunch with you. You're like, fuck yeah, you do. But it became very clear in this meeting that he was just taking me out to lunch to tell me I had no shot. It was bizarre. You know, he told me his whole life story, which I sat and dutifully listened to because, you know, I think this meeting's going somewhere good. And then he was done and asked me how old I was. And I think I was 33 at the time. I said, oh, I'm 33. And he's like, never going to happen. What? Literally looked me in the face and was like, it's never going to happen. You need to figure something else out. I'm like, and that meeting traumatized me so much that I thought, okay, well then I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore I'm not going to make another record. I'm not going to do any of this. And I threw myself into helping other people, you know, and working on other people's records. I also was running, you know, my father got very sick, and so I started running day-to-day operations for his business. So I was just, you know, doing the 12-hour days, and none of it was for me. And I literally was like waking up in the morning, down in the Tylenol. I drink tea more than coffee, drinking my giant cups of tea and cramming those podcasts in to just make me feel like I was still kind of feeding myself. You know, I had no life. It was just about getting other people's stuff done. There was no time for self-expression. And spiritually, I was just so depleted. I self-expression, even if I'd had the time, felt insurmountable. And I hear that from women very often, that just they're doing so much and they are so riddled with anxiety, and nobody knows that that's happening for them. They're so high functioning, so good at masking, so caring. I know this comes from a place of deep care, that they throw themselves into helping others, supporting others, facilitating others, being useful. Oh, I'm useful. But they still feel empty. They still feel empty. And I know that the thing that would soothe the emptiness is also the thing that feels the hardest, which is your own art. When I finally escaped my ex, I went through a period of about 2 to 3 months of complete breakdown, just complete breakdown. I mean, the acute recovery period lasted longer than that, but those first 2 to 3 months were awful. I mean, I would get hit with these bouts of fear that he would like come to where I was living, that he would try to get me, and my legs would literally go out from under me. Like I would just crumple to the floor. Or, or I'd hear a text message go off, because he used to blow up my phone with text messages. And I would physically start shaking. It was just, and I'm giving you the Coles notes, because some of it I don't really feel like sharing right now. And my art making was so tied to him, even though the last kind of period of our relationship was just very much focused on other people. My art making was still tied to him. And I couldn't comprehend life with art making without him. Like I was so conditioned to everything would be approved by him. Everything would go through him. Yes, I mean, I wrote novels that he never bothered to read. But anytime he picked up the books, he would immediately start picking apart the sentences and circling word. Like it was just, everything went through him. So I just thought, nope, that's it, done. I'm not doing art anymore. Boom. I could not comprehend. I couldn't figure out how to. My body was just like, we can't do this. My mind was like, we can't do that. Nope, we're done. And it was my therapist. And the very first session I had with her was like, no fucking way. Like no. You're an artist. This is what you do. So your homework is to do art. Your homework is to try songwriting. And because I'm, like many of you listening to this, very good at homework. We're very good at homework, aren't we? And we're very wired to please. I was like, oh, well, then I must do the homework. I'm good at homework. I will do the homework. And it was really fucking hard. And the music was not great. It didn't flow like it used to. It didn't move like it used to in any way. And if you've been doing this for a while, and I hold I know how scary this is, this moment when you've been making art for a while, or you made art in your youth, and you know what it is to make your art at a level that you feel pride over, that you feel good about, like what you are capable of, to be in a moment where that feels very far away is scary. It is scary, and it takes real effort to set aside that self judgment, that to do it in spite of the intrusive thoughts of this sucks, you're never good at this, you're not as good as you used to be, to sit alongside that dialogue and chip away at the art making is challenging. It's doable, but it's challenging. And the good thing about it is that the more you do that, the more you sit with that discomfort and still take the brush and move it across the canvas, even if it's one line, the more you create a sense of safety for your spirit, for your body, for your nervous system. And then you discover a new way to relate to your art making. And then you get to a place where your art making is a non-negotiable in your life, like brushing your teeth. And I'm still working on the balance of all that. I don't want to leave you with this false impression that like everything in my life is wonderful. Well, no, I mean a lot of it is, and everything in my life is a hell of a lot better than it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It is still something I am aware of, creating that balance between life and art making. And I know when I find myself too much in the life and not enough in the art, I know that there's something in me that I maybe need to journal through or examine or talk through with someone. And then, the scheduling opens up, and the art making is a priority again. And things start to flow and move with more ease. So when I say art isn't worth dying for, I mean that both the overdoing, the blinders on, the sacrifice, the depletion to make art, and the underdoing, the denial, and the rejection, and the shutting down and not doing of the art, both of those extremes can wreck you physically, spiritually, emotionally. And art is a beautiful energy. Maybe art transcends the actual works themselves, and art is like love, or universe, or God, small g, God. No religion here. Perhaps art is an energy that does not ask for sacrifice or rejection. It's an energy we live in conversation with. It's something that is ready to nurture us and hold us and be with us no matter what. And perhaps all it asks is that we care for ourselves and make time for it. Simple, not necessarily easy, but definitely doable. So, if what I've said today has stirred something in you, I invite you to head over to rockwoodalchemy.com. The link is in the show notes, and explore the resources I have there. There is something there that will meet you in this season of life that you are in. and will help you build a life that nourishes you and fills your day with joy and art. So, this was an intense one. Yeah. Thank you for listening. And I will be back in a couple weeks to talk about something else. Maybe it'll be intense. Maybe it won't. We'll see what art moves through me when we get to that discussion. So, again, thank you. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.